I'm going to be presenting It's Like with a Pregnancy Test Co-Design of a Speculative Technology for Public HIV-Related Stigma and Its Implications for Social Media. I'm Juan Maestre, the first author of the paper. Dara, Furness, and Patrick Shih are the co-authors. Public HIV-related stigma, or the stigma that exists around the human immunodeficiency virus in the US, is a major problem. 8 out of 10 people living with HIV report feeling this type of stigma, which has been linked to depression and anxiety. It hinders access to social support and access to early treatment. In the field of ACI, designers and researchers have been focusing on medication adherence apps where people would be reminded to take their medications daily. They would be connected to healthcare providers or clinicians to track them and monitor that they're taking their medications on time. On the right-hand side, you can see a gamified version of this medication adherence app where participants would get more points if they are adherent to the medication. They could even have leaderboards where they could compare how they're doing with other users. And in our prior work, we found that this type of applications were a little bit offensive to people in with HIV and even further stigmatizing because they didn't want to be reminded to take the medication every day as they would be reminded of their condition every day. And they didn't want to feel tracked or monitored as if they were some type of vector of disease that needed to be controlled or monitored. Rather, they needed technology that would help them cope with HIV-related stigma, which was the main problem related to their chronic health condition. And so we found in prior work, and you can have access to the papers that are listed here at the bottom of the slide, that people living with HIV were using social media in order to cope with HIV-related stigma, but social media has not been designed for the purpose of coping with the stigma and so had some limitations. The key ones are lack of control and trust in the disclosure process. They didn't know exactly who was there looking at what they were disclosing, reading their disclosures, and they were really worried about being blocked immediately after the disclosure. So this is the case of abrupt social rejection. They were also worried about issues with privacy and confidentiality as they didn't know exactly where the disclosures took place and what threads and what social media platforms. So this data persistence aspect was a problem as well, as if they wanted to delete all the disclosures that they had done up to that point. They didn't really know where those disclosures happened or took place. Another problem was the lack of effective peer support, as they couldn't find someone living with HIV that, apart from living with HIV, would share lived experience or personality traits that would make them a good mentor-mentee connection, or that would be able to provide effective peer support. And so for this study, describing the paper, we wanted to answer the research questions. How can we redesign social media technology to aid with these coping strategies for public HIV-related stigma? And also, in particular, how can we redesign social media technology to help address HIV disclosure and social support tensions, which are the types of tensions that I just explained and that we found in prior work. So we conducted a series of co-design workshops on online settings, asynchronously using Facebook private groups and synchronously using Zoom. We recruited participants from different geographic locations. It was a diverse group. In the screening survey, when we were recruiting, participants would select whether they wanted to participate on Facebook asynchronously or on Zoom synchronously, and then we randomly assigned the different participants to the different groups. And we used participatory design as the main methodology, as we wanted them to co-design these technologies that would help them cope with HIV-related stigma, rather than we designing that for them. And also participatory design helped participants articulate their values, their needs and desires, as that was the emphasis. We were not really interested in looking at the designs of the technologies per se, but we wanted to foreground what it was needed from the technology in order for it to be more effective to help people cope with HIV-related stigma. We use speculative design and value-sensitive design so that we can open up the imagination of participants and make them think about technologies without worrying about a particular technology. It didn't have to be social media platforms, or they didn't have to use specific terminology or technology jargon. And so, for example, in the first stage of the workshops, participants generated ideas, and we wanted them to imagine that they went to the future where people living with HIV were using technology effectively to cope with HIV-related stigma, come back to the present and write a letter describing what they saw, the type of technology that they saw people were using in this futuristic world, and also draw that technology. And for example, here we have examples of AR, augmented reality eyeglasses, or robots that look like vending machines that could provide resources to people living with HIV. Participants in each group got together on a virtual board to put their key ideas of their technologies on Post-it notes, and then together they clustered the common idea so that we can identify together categories for their technologies. On the second phase of the workshops, based on what was done in the first phase, in the ideation phase, we created scenarios where we would show how the technology that they co-created in the first phase of the workshops would be used. And they provided more feedback, and we wanted them to iterate on the features and functionality of the technology based on those scenarios. We also show them visioning cards so that we can talk more about the tensions that we found in prior work around disclosure and social support. And so this will be the structure of the workshops. First, we started with a generative, an ideation brainstorming of the different concepts that they co-designed together. And then participants in the second phase, based on scenarios and envisioning cards, iterated on those concepts. And then finally, in the final stage and third stage, they came up with a final design concept and evaluated it. And so the key aspect across the different workshops is this idea of a technology-mediated disclosure. So the participants wanted to be able to disclose via the use of technology in a nonverbal way. But after that nonverbal disclosure, so for example, a microchip sending the disclosure of someone living with HIV, after that, they wanted to be able to follow up with a face-to-face interaction. So this type of mediation and disclosure had to happen in a co-located fashion, either using a smartphone app or using, for example, augmented reality glasses, where they would disclose to another person non-verbally that is also wearing the eyeglasses that they're living with HIV, and they could follow up with a face-to-face interaction. But because they're doing it in a co-located fashion, they were sure of whom they were sending the disclosure to. From the transcripts and all the artifacts produced and the concepts produced in the workshops, we use content analysis and thematic analysis to analyze the data. And so from the findings, we translated into considerations for technology design for social media. And around disclosure, we found that it's important not to use HIV status disclosure fields in certain social media platforms where they use them, because it could lead to abrupt social rejection, just someone blocking someone that has disclosed that they're living with HIV. And participants also wanted to have some sort of visual signifiers that would give more information about the potential disclosure recipients. Visual signifiers that could let them know about the positionality of those users around HIV or sexual orientation or LGBTQ community. And they also wanted automatic delivery of educational material prior and upon disclosure, so that people who are the disclosure recipients can know more about HIV. And they wanted also the opportunity to have follow-up face-to-face interaction, like what I said before. It was important for participants. According to peer support, they wanted to be able to filter and match to other people based on personality traits or the type of support that they needed. But they wanted these support providers to be vetted and trained by group administrators or someone who was a mentor or someone who was living with HIV who could recruit this type of support providers. And they also wanted more information about these potential support providers with the use of visual signifiers that could provide a better idea of the quality of support that they were providing via the use of ratings or reputation or badges. And for privacy and safety, they wanted technology that could detect the stigmatizing language and behavior, the automatic delivery of educational material on disclosure and harm reduction, access and linkage to emergency and tangible support if they needed that, and also a feature that would allow them to record every time that they were disclosing that they were living with HIV on social media, as well as be able to control the permanency of that data, being able, for example, to delete or eliminate that data at any point. And of course, strong data encryption. You can read more about this finding and implications in our paper. Thank you very much for your attention.